You are listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. This episode is about The Only Good Fascist is a Very Dead Fascist, track 11 from 1996's Less Talk, More Rock.
Keith, how are you feeling this evening about chatting about this tune for this particular episode?
You know, I was kind of excited, and then I was scrolling through YouTube comments, and I think this is the only song that seems to invite trolls or contrarians or combative personalities, because at least a half of the comments and responses were super aggressive and just not positive. And while I don't think necessarily our listeners will have that same response, just predicting what it might look like when this is posted on social media for some neckbeard in their basement looking up fascists to be able to troll people, that makes me a little uneasy.
Yeah. I am and I'm not excited about this song at the same time. This is kind of a nerve-wracking one for me. So to me, I see this song as an incredibly brave song. Not just to release in 1996, which was incredibly brave in 1996, if I think about music back then. But I'd also even say, even now, it's still pretty brave. It's a very direct statement about the world in many ways, in a joking manner.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that it talks about, fascists being dead and everything, but, it's one of those songs where it's like, you can critique it easily by saying, do they just want people to die? But, this is a very brave song, and I am not a brave person in general. If I'm thinking about the punk scene I first attended in 1998, I went to a Blink-182, an Aquabat show in 1998. I went to a NoFX Bouncing Souls and High Standard show in 1998, and I'm picturing the mosh pit. I was like skinny 8th grader looking down into the mosh pit of Mississippi Nights in St. Louis. And I'm seeing a lot in my memory of shirtless, sweaty, hairy, humongous, tough guy people in the pit, violently running into each other as hard as they could. And I know that the story of punk rock show mosh pits is that you pick people up, but there was also a lot of the antithesis of that, of knocking people over and, people coming out with bloody noses and people coming out with broken hands. I saw a guy break his hand at Glassjaw last December here in Buffalo when they were opening for Every Time I Die. So I'm thinking about like the violence on the floor that I remember from back in those early days. And I remember like quote unquote friends of mine back from this time period as well, being a 6th grader, 7th grader, 8th grader. You meet people at school and you so desperately want them to like you. And I'm thinking back on all the people whose approval I so desperately sought, who thought I was, gay, who thought that I was, not tough enough or cool enough for them, but they were into punk music and metal, and I wanted them to like me so much. And I would just listen to them throw out casually racist and sexist and homophobic ideology when we were like 13 years old, which is when this record came out. And it was so casual and so direct, so natural to them, so unthinking what they were saying. And so I think about the time period of when this would have came out. It was before I found propaganda, but I have vivid memories of my experiences with people in my own age group who, would very much be into the ideas of fascism, racism, sexism, homophobia, all the things this song critiques. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about,
Yeah. And I kind of mentioned before that I had to find this band when I did because my limited worldview in 8th grade, I wouldn't have been okay hearing this song. Like I would have probably just written it off or used a slur myself and, made fun of it, and then, listened to something that I thought was macho, while myself being the the least macho person you'll ever meet. So just very performative, very kind of like making up for whatever I saw as a deficiency in myself, or like not living up to other people's expectations of my, manlyhood or whatever. So this has evolved. I think this song has kind of evolved for me, for whatever you want to say about it musically. There's a lot that I would say there's a reason why it's so relevant right now, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the relevance is something that you and I have both been noticing since we started doing this show. If you search for Propaganda, not their account, but if you just search the word Propaganda on Twitter in the search bar, you will find out just how incredibly popular this song is. I can't even begin to count the amount of tweets I have seen in the past few months where a response to a news story or a comment or something like, for example, Trump declaring himself the president of law and order, or like when police in the US or like Belarus recently dragged protesters into unmarked vans, or like when POTUS is surrounded by a line of clapping men who drown out reporters who are attempting to ask him critical questions, or ICE suspiciously giving large amounts of hysterectomies to women in, essentially these camps that have sprung up around the U.S. with regards to quote unquote illegal immigration, which was reported by The Guardian this past week. But so many responses to these stories and these tweets is a link straight to this song. You know what I mean? Like people throw this song out there as responses to so much. And I'm just amazed at how continuously relevant it is. So this is kind of super hard stuff to talk about. And like I said before, I'm not nearly as brave as Propaganda are. I don't know if they would classify themselves as brave, but I mean, if you go back and you look at videos of Propaganda in the 90s playing shows where people are openly heckling Chris as he's standing at a microphone between songs, like, saying something that he thought was important to say at the time. And people, very clearly screaming, "Get off the stage," and all kinds of stuff. So many people have messaged us on social media telling me stories of seeing Propaganda in the 90s and having people be like talking trash about them in the crowd or yelling things at them on stage. And I gotta give this band some props for being so brave and so outspoken in so many ways, because I never would have been able to do it. It's a petrifying idea to stand on a stage in the 90s, thinking back on those punk shows that I'm visualizing from back then, and to say these things on a stage, like, and I'm like so conflict averse, like humongously conflict averse. Like I tweeted recently that I have an interpersonal anxiety disorder related to conflict, and the thought of getting into a fight is like petrifying. Yeah. Like I have chronic back problems, chronic knee problems. I've had surgery on both. I'm phobic of conflict, like totally. And I can't express my admiration enough for Propaganda for their career of, singing songs like this.
Yeah, I think it's one thing in 2016 to post the meme of Brad Pitt saying you're going Nazi hunting, right? That's one thing. But to be in the midst of it, while it, like the punk scene and the hardcore scene were incredibly volatile and violent, I never witnessed that. And I could watch as many documentaries about the 80s and 90s punk scene to kind of fill in those gaps, but I didn't experience it. And if I saw a Hammerskin or some guy with an 88 tattoo on the back of his head at a show, I would not call him out because I would be afraid of getting beat up. Like that's just, I know exactly what you mean. There's a difference between what I believe and what I want to see. but versus what I'm willing to put my body on the line for.
Yeah, and and like people who hold these beliefs, these fascist, ultranationalist, racist, sexist, homophobic, dangerous ideas, they exist very much in the world. Like I was working at a music venue called the Blue Note in Columbia, Missouri in like 2005.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember exactly what show it was, but I think it was Gigi Allen's old band. I think they're called the Murder Junkies. With his brother Merle was in the band, and I was working at the door taking tickets, and a group of guys with swastikas on their faces, tattooed on their faces, came to the door, and I was so freaking scared instantly. I was like, I have no idea. I should just quit. There's no way that I'm capable of like handling this situation. And they didn't do anything, but they came to the door, and I was like a 23-year-old skinny dork taking tickets at a concert venue. And the boss of the venue came and handled it very diplomatically, and they did not come in the show. But there was a very serious conversation that happened in front of the building about what would transpire inside the venue if those guys were to come in. And I got to hand it to my boss for not being flapped in any way, shape, or form. He did not like even blink. He went and he handled the situation, and I was standing at the door like a total moron, like a college senior, weighed like 165 pounds, like just an idiot. And I like these folks exist, and so talking about this stuff on the show is like it's a little weird.
Yeah, especially not engaging and not having the track record of calling those people out other than in tweets to people who I know agree with me.
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to be an interesting episode.
All right, Greg, who is our guest?
Sulynn Hago,
right.
Guitarist for Propaganda and guitar lesson instructor extraordinaire, is our guest this week. As listeners will remember from episode 10 on Tertium Non Datur, Sulynn was a fan of the band long before joining as a member. Having Sulynn's excited participation on this show as a return guest, but also to discuss this particular song in the wake of the summer of 2020, which Sulynn experienced living in New York City, is, there's been widespread protests, a raging pandemic that has paralyzed so much of this country, and all the while leading up to a national election is special to have Sulynn. So shout out to Sulynn. Thank you so much for coming back. And so without further delay, please enjoy my conversation with Sulynn Hago on The Only Good Fascist is a Very Dead Fascist.
Swastikas and clan robes, sexist, racist, homophobes, Aryan nations and hammer skins.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had more time to think, or like I told you earlier, I'm like kind of like between like teaching, let me do this thing here, and running around. But I think this song in general, like my history with this song is involved in thought. I mean, I guess a lot of propaganda songs do, but for sure this one, you know, and I think this is one of the ones on Let's Talk More Rock that really stuck with me.
Yeah, well, let's get into this real quick.
Yeah.
So, Sulynn, welcome back to Unscripted Moments. It's just awesome to have you back on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, so we're here today to talk about, as we were just alluding to, the song "The Only Good Fascist is a Very Dead Fascist," track 11 from Let's Talk More Rock. But before we dive into this song, I just want to know a little bit about what your life has been like the last couple months. I want to hear some of your standout thoughts on what's been going on around the country this summer in the wake of the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. So I know you live in New York City, across the state from me, and I've seen like brutal videos of police crackdowns in the streets. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience in the city there this summer?
Yeah, well, I'm in Brooklyn, and it's intense. I would say it's like a weird balance of like intensity and community. And where there are a lot of beautiful things that have come out of it. Actually, not far from me in this park, they've had the vigil for George Floyd. Like they're, I think, at day 66. They've had it every day. Actually, my partner and her daughter have gone almost every day.
Wow.
It's pretty crazy. Yeah. And they still go like every night at like 7 o'clock or something like that. So on that side, it's really inspiring to to see like amidst the pandemic side of like this kind of community coming together, and everyone's still at their homes and just taking this opportunity while everyone's home to try to fight the power, for lack of better words.
Mm-hmm.
But then on the other side, the ugly side, it's like it's a lot. I mean, that's an understatement. How do I even begin? It's really scary. Like, I feel tense a lot. Like, this is the worst I've felt living in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, where's this going? And as we're inching towards the election, it just feels more intense. Like, I'm more afraid of the election than I am the pandemic. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of the vibe, it's just a lot. It's very overwhelming with and I haven't firsthand seen any kind of craziness, but obviously, all those videos circling around, it's it's pretty crazy.
Well, and I live in Buffalo, where the 75-year-old man was pushed to the ground and had a fractured skull. I'm sure you saw that. And then I saw videos that my friend posted in Manhattan where the police, the people had the barricade, and then the cop car, like the SUV, drove through the barricade.
Yeah.
And it's, this is our state. I live in the same state as you. It's a different city, but it still is surreal to watch these things happening in your state. And it's a state that is like a blue state. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like a state
and then
that
there
people care about that.
It was the one that was recent was the kidnapping the protester, these unmarked vehicles.
Oh my God, I know.
And yeah, like she was like a trans woman, and the scary part is like they're not, they have this like lame excuse, like I believe they said like she ruined like surveillance cameras or something, and she was on this wanted list. It's like, no, but that's against the law to just snatch someone. What is that? Like, anyone can be snatched at any point. Like, and you just don't give them a reason. You can't fucking do that. It's like, what is that? What the fuck is going on? And and just seeing the cops like circling around the van, like warding off the protesters. I mean, it's insane. It's unreal to see all of these accumulating. Just like, it's not even just one instance. There's so many instances of just things that are like it's just baffling to be like, this is the world we're living in. Like, this is happening right now.
And like in you being in New York City, like if you think about these videos that you've seen, like these things could happen to anybody. You could be literally in the wrong place at the wrong time. Somebody next to you in the protest does something, and then all of a sudden you are involved in an altercation with a police officer because of something that somebody next to you did. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's
so
scary.
even you, like somebody who like cares about these issues a whole bunch and is like a totally peaceful person, you could get roped into something like this. And it's like, all of a sudden, you're protesting, things are good, the vibe is good, and then you're in danger.
Yeah, I had a very small moment of that. I think it was in March. I went on one of the protests, like what the fuck do you call it? Just walking through this Brooklyn. And there was this point where we were like walking through a tunnel, and under the tunnel was a line of cops. It felt like a cat and mouse like gag, where it's like they're ready there to trap protesters. Like the way they were standing, this like intimidation tactic, that I wasn't breathing. Like I had the similar thought as what you just described. Like, if at any moment someone either pisses off a cop or just a cop just decides, all right, here we are. Like, let's just choose these random people. Like, game over. You know what I mean? It's just like they could just fuck shit up. It was so fucking scary. And just how they were just standing there under the tunnel, like really waiting to trap people. So fucking scary.
Well, and I'm wondering if under that tunnel has no closed caption TV access from cameras on attached to buildings and things like that.
Exactly.
Like, I'm wondering if there's no footage that would be captured from official television cameras in that moment.
Yeah, like actually one of my best friends he's in Tampa. He flew out to Portland during all those protests, and he was considered part of the press. He was out there to document, report, and take pictures of everything going on. And he said that there was a point where they pinned like a bunch of journalists, including himself, under a fence, and were just shooting rounds from everywhere. And he said it was so loud, so chaotic, and that it just went on for a very long time. And he said that he's like, I wish I had the video to share to everyone, but they took my camera. Like they took his phone. He had to get a new phone the next day.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Oh my
And
God.
he's just like, I can't believe this is happening right now.
Yeah, the tenseness of this moment, and like you said, being more nervous of the election than of a global pandemic, which is taking 1,000 American lives per day. Even in the beginning of August. I mean, that's a heavy statement, and you don't make that like lightly. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel like it's just intensifying like every day, like and maybe because of the lack of Trump able to have like these rallies where he riles people up, he's finding different ways of riling people up, which is send these fucking people like troops basically to Portland and just like igniting this fire that's and then just saying these things about delaying the election. I'm afraid that he's gonna lose, and then he just refuses to leave. Like what do we fucking do? It's like it's things like that. So yeah, it's a very intense time. And in terms of the pandemic, and I don't know about you being Buffalo, but I'm just kind of proceeding kind of similarly to what I was in during lockdown. I'm not really venturing out too much, very lightly, but
enough to stay sane.
Exactly.
So anyway, I mean, so this isn't your first time on this show. Listeners will have heard your Tertium Non Datur episode before, and we've kept in touch here and there since we recorded that. And you mentioned to me in a message a couple weeks ago that you'd be down to chat about the song "The Only Good Fascist Is a Very Dead Fascist." And since you mentioned that, Keith and I were like going on Twitter a ton, and every time we search propaganda in Twitter in the search bar, I come across so many people posting a link to this song in response to like all these social issues that you're mentioning. And like this is like arguably the most timely propaganda song. It's wild. Like today I went on Twitter in the trends, and Master Race was trending in response to some dude in Idaho holding a Nazi flag on some street corner. Do you know what I mean? It's like
it's pretty insane how it's come back around. Like it's interesting too, because with the propaganda experience of being like, we used to play this like in the 90s, and that was a brave thing to do. It was like risky. Like there were like potentially Nazis there, and to think like, fuck, we could be potentially, we're now with me in the band, like we could be potentially in the same spot maybe when shows happen again, or just even the statement needs to be sung again, or I mean, it should have always, but I guess it wasn't as I guess it didn't seem as prominent of an issue,
Yeah. I mean, this is a 25-year-old song. Are you surprised by this song's permanent timeliness and relevance?
No, it's sad. Like I really wish even just in general today that I would be surprised by things, especially with everything that's been happening recently. I feel like less I'm becoming surprised. Like I think in the past I would have been like, I can't believe people do that. Like people have the audacity to, do certain things, or not care about other people like this. But it's part of the living experience. Sadly, I just maybe at times I have more of a hopeful outlook, and just hoping that like the betterment of people comes out more, but I think part of why I'm not surprised too is that this shit's taught young, and I think people overlook the impact of messages sent to kids, and how that really is the seed, and it just continues to intensify and grow, and it's just these kids become adults, and even not kids, but it's like these feelings of having of the other you know, are just constantly, is that message itself. I think it's even just part of our culture, whether it's like in any other shape or form. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. You know, and this song's only like a minute and 10 seconds long. It's not an insanely dense song lyrically. Like, you know how today's Empire's Tomorrow's Ashes and like Mate Ka have like so many lyrics, it would take forever to talk about them all. This song does not have a ton of lyrics, but it has a lot of topics packed in. You know what I mean? There's
it has
so
an
much.
attitude that I think that it's like, I think that's part of what resonated with me with the song. It's like an attitude to racist that I really related to. Like, you're a bunch of fucking goofs, you know, you're a bunch of fucking, and like I know, probably gonna mention this, but the music itself is kind of clownish, or just like, and it just matches that vibe of like, fuck, like, if you really think about it, being racist is such a fucking geeky thing to be. Like,
Yes.
And here's, you know, maybe to answer your question better about, am I surprised? It's like, I think part of the human experience, you know, whatever your upbringing is, doesn't even matter, race, gender, or whatever. It's like you have things that happen to you that bring you down, that are like kind of like, and I think part of the human experience is to find ways in which you can overcome them and feel like confident in yourself and strong, you know?
Yeah.
And I think there's just certain people who go about it in a better way, like a better delivery, like maybe through like arts or sports or any kind of like release in that sense, you know, and empowerment, self-empowerment. And then there's these other group of people who go about that same goal through fucking putting other people down, thinking like their race is better. But ultimately, everyone wants the fucking same thing. Everyone wants to just like feel good about themselves, you know, and just feel like they're strong and confident people, and that they're like loved. And it's just like insane to be like that. It's like hate is the fuel for a lot of people to feel that way. Because all these fuckers hate themselves. You can tell that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But this is how they feel like powerful.
Yeah. You know, and I feel better when everybody feels better. Do you know what I mean? Like when I know the world is like in pain, like I hate myself more.
Yeah.
You know, it sucks. It's a terrible feeling. Do you have like do you have any favorite lines in the song? This thing is like so wild.
Yeah, I know. It's like, you know, I'd say like I guess I love a man in uniform.
Yeah.
I feel like when I heard that, like when I was young, fuck, it cracked me up just because of the sarcasm. Just like, it was just so genius to me. And I just feel like the way he fucking just yells it just makes me laugh. Like, yeah, I guess, you know, and part of why that line's so awesome, I mean, obviously it's everything around it. It's just making fun of like, even just like the costumeness, that's a word, of the racist, like, or the master race, if you want to call it that, like the opening line, swastikas and clan robes, like even that, like it's just like these costumes that give you these fucking power, and then the whole like just kind of goofing on this, like, oh, man in uniform is so strong, you know, it's so the person to look up to. It's just like totally goofing on the costume essentially of this quote unquote master race. So I just, you know, I think part of my appeal with punk at the beginning was just hearing music that was so sarcastic, like kind of like for the first time, and being like, whoa, like I just, you know, because everything, like there was a lot of that didn't feel like that, and just hearing that, I was just like, this is great. Like this is how I feel as a, you know, like this is kind of like the people, like I get these people and they kind of get me, like, yeah, it's fucking stupid.
Well, yeah, and earlier when you said that all these racists and white supremacists are just goofs themselves, they're just total dinguses. And like, so this song is like goofing on them hardcore. And, you know, it also, the song quite effectively uses humor. And like, I almost feel badly laughing when I listen to this song or read it, because it's such an important topic. But, you know, the spectacular punchlines in this song, kill them all and let a Norse god sort them out. Brown power ass in your white power face. I love a man.
I love that one, actually. That one might be my second favorite.
Oh my God. Tell me more.
Well, fuck being brown. I was like, fuck yeah. Because even the
man.
phrase brown power, like I'm just like, I mean, we have Latin pride, but like we don't put it in these cheesy terms. And it actually even shows how fucking stupid the phrase white power is. Because to hear it even in a different, like, I don't know, it just seems kind of goofy, but it's also just that response, that kind of like, well, if you're a white power, then I'm a brown power. There's just something kind of it's clever,
Yeah.
It's like perfect rebuttal.
Yeah.
And it's just obviously has the best like image.
Yeah, totally. I love the Norse god stuff. That's just so perfect. Kill them all and let a Norse god sort them out. Like, here's your, white gods, have at it.
Yeah.
Oh my God. This song also has like a call for like a better future. It says, why don't we start making a history worth being proud of? It says that in the song. How do you feel about that as like a hopeful line thrown into the middle of this song?
Yeah, and along with that is the whole like, let's start fighting the real fucking enemy.
Yeah.
Like that really stood out for me. I feel like this song, I know it's so short, but it just like, I feel like it like taught me so much, or made me feel like I found my people, even before being in the band. Like in terms of like human like just thought, it's the fact that we need to come together, like these. How do I put this? Like it's so easy for like, let's say someone like Donald Trump, who's like rich, like out of touch, like he's protected. He's been protected his whole life. He can easily attack people because it's so hard to like attack him, essentially, even like physically. Like he's fucking got like a barrier of people. When you're loaded like that, you're kind of untouchable.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's easy for these racists to attack someone on their kind of level. And it's like, but that isn't the real enemy. It's like, it's these fuckers creating this bullshit, creating this system, creating economic oppression. And I mean, you could go a long list with that, but so that's the idea, is just like wanting to fucking like be able to communicate this to people who think this way. But it's sad that it's like, why does it seem so hard? I like the idea of like, yeah, this is the goal. Like, let's fucking come together. But
it's so funny that you mentioned his wall, because he built a new 1.5 mile wall around the White House, and you're hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of meters away from the White House now at your closest. So you go there as a tourist or whatever, and it's like a doom wall, like miles around DC.
Yeah. Well, it's like people like that, like billionaires, they have the privilege again of this kind of protection and this kind of less access to the public,
Yeah.
like in terms of safety. Like, so it's like, yeah, no shit, you're gonna be fucking like running your mouth talking shit because it's easy for you. You've gotten away with it for so long.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're kind of branching off.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned the real enemy a moment ago. So the real enemy alluded to in the song, which if you go to Propaganda's website, in the lyrics section of this song, it spells it out for you a little bit. White, male, capitalist supremacists of the world that, they pay lip service to equality in public while also perpetuating systems that enable the ongoing cycles of poverty and unequal access to health, opportunity, safety. And so, like, whenever you say something like white, male, etc., and you use that as a critique, what a lot of people hear, like white America, they think that you're trying to take things away from them to give it to other people, instead of saying, we want everybody to have what we have. Do you know what I mean? So it's like if they get more, I get less kind of thing. And that's what everybody's afraid of.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm curious, like, do you have any idea on how to frame this song and open people's minds to the fact that they aren't being attacked personally if they're white, like by this song, but instead to portray it as a unifying force to make our world better for everyone?
Yeah, and it's mostly, putting it from the perspective of people who aren't white, who are being attacked by just this portion of the white race that is very kind of aggressive towards people of color. So yeah, I mean, it's funny you say this, like, in how to frame it. That's a really complex question. Oh,
yeah.
Still with me? Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. I'm here. Yeah, it's tough because like if you hear like people saying, "Oh, the white male capitalist supremacists," etc. If you're a white male, like what those people are hearing is that they're being attacked. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they're not hearing it as a way to like let's make the world better for everybody. They're hearing like, "Oh my God, I'm a white male. I'm being attacked." Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I almost feel like is the fear that what's going to happen, what happened to, like, let's say Native Americans or like Africans, like they are afraid that that's what's going to happen to them, like
Yeah.
this like kind of overthrowing. And it's like, I actually think it's more of that, because it's almost like this kind of threat of like an overthrow, when it's like, no, we're not trying to overthrow. We're just all trying to live like amiable, like together. Like we're not trying to take over as if like we are the only race, you know. We are actually, and again, we like, it's more like we want it to be diverse, you know what I mean? Like
I do too.
And I don't know how to put this to words. It's almost like I need to like simmer on it, because it is a big question and a big topic, because it does involve like the perception of what's happening, and it's obviously based on everyone's experiences and race, and whether, you know, race has been convenient for some and race has been inconvenient for others.
Yep.
You know?
Well, and I'm
part
one of
the
those.
and part of the difficulty is words don't have the same power to just be like, yeah, well, I've, you know, dealt with a lot of shit being brown or something, you know, where it's like, I think there's a rebuttal. Well, I've dealt with a lot of shit being white. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, and it's that whole, like, I'm not trying to say that your life hasn't been hard. Everyone's life's hard, but it's like it's that whole idea of like this one factor does make almost a living experience just feel like that much extra work. And it's more the treatment, I guess, more of like feeling like everyone can actually be treated the same playing field. And this even goes with gender too, like kind of like, and not have like alternate scripts for different races or different genders, you know. And I mean, that's why Black Lives Matter is like really pushing that, you know, because you can't say like if George Floyd didn't look that way and he was like I think Sean King called it something like referred to it as like the Taylor Swift, I forgot the last word, but something as if like, imagine if someone who looked like Taylor Swift or Taylor Swift herself did the crime that like this Black person who died did, like would they have met the same like end, you know? Like, would you see like like 4 cops like pinning like someone who looks like Taylor Swift down, like choking her, you know? It's like, and that's a really interesting, it's like a test, you know. It's a really good point.
Absolutely. Does the punishment fit the crime? And obviously no, it's absurd. And it just kind of shows you the absurdity as well, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's upsetting that how much like people are just treated differently for things they can't control, like you know, in terms of like physical appearances. Like,
yeah, it's a game of chance how you're born. Do you know what I mean? We don't choose where we're born, who we're born to, what we look like, what our gender is, what our race is. It's all a game of chance, and the way you come into the world is not in our control.
Yeah. So
yeah, did you guys does the band play this song still? Have you played this one with the band?
Yeah, actually, I think within our like recent tours,
I know
I kind of, as things were kind of already getting pretty intense, it was thought it was a good idea to bring this one back. It was so fun, and it just felt good to like fucking just spit that message back out into the world, you know. And obviously this time as part of the performance side. Yeah, you know, that song, it's fucking a little gem, because it's kind of simple, you know. It's not like in terms of the propaganda catalog, it's not like shredding or anything, but it matters so much, I think, to me. It's definitely one of my favorite propaganda songs.
Whose idea was it to put it back in the set list?
It might have been Chris's. Yeah, I think so.
Awesome. I mean, I honestly feel like if you guys came out and Todd just started hitting that bass line on the opening song, I almost feel like the crowd will go completely mental with this as an opener. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a good idea.
Oh my gosh, maybe you're first, everybody. Do you like the musical progression in this tune? It's super heavy to me.
Yeah, it's like it has that kind of, like I said this earlier, like this like circusy, like it's a goofy song, but it's like but it doesn't feel goofy when you're playing it. Like I mean, it kind of does, but not. It feels more heavy. Like fuck yeah, we're
Yeah.
fucking, and it's partly because you know what's about to come out
Yeah, yeah.
lyrically, and
Oh
it
my
just it
God.
has so much power. And I love just the fact that the content is all, it's like it's a mocking, just like white supremacists, and just going that fucking extra mile and making the music a bit of a mockery. It's so
Yeah.
fucking awesome. That kind
That's-
of, and again, that's the shit where I'm like, this is what music should be like.
Oh my God.
It's just,
And you know what? That's what propaganda's been about. You know what I mean? The entire
Yeah.
history of the band. That's what it's been about.
yeah. So musically, it's great, and then that little middle section, it's pretty fun. It's just like kind of I don't know how to describe it. Just, yeah, it's a fun song. Like, it's one of
Nice.
those, like, when you think about, like, if you play like for me, like Zero Boy songs or Minor Threat songs or like Ramon songs, where it's
Yes.
like it's not the most technically like crazy bit, but that shit, like, you could play anytime and it still rules, and it has that kind of power to me and enjoyment, where it's just like it's just a fucking fun one. Just
Amazing.
let it all go.
Well, Sulynn, it is so awesome to chat with you about this song. I am so delighted to hear, about your summer in New York City during this incredibly important time in our country's history, leading up to this incredibly important election we have coming up this fall. It's scary. I feel, grateful to you for being so open and honest and talking to me about your experiences and why you love this song so much, and also your experience playing it with the band. It's so cool to hear these stories.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a good time. It's yeah, it's cool. It's like, what's rad about this is like to dig back into like what made you love it when you first heard it, and just to
Yeah.
revisit that. Sometimes you just put something on. Maybe it's just like it's just background. Maybe it's listening, and you're not. It's like you're not spewing it all out again. So it was a pleasure. So thanks for that as well.
Capitalism, slavery, genocide, sitcoms. This is your fucking white history, my friend. So why don't we start making the history worth being about and start fighting the real fucking enemy?
Well, thanks again to Sulynn for talking to us about this really awesome and provocative song. And Greg, let's break down some of the ideas here. There's quite a bit to digest, so give us a little bit of context for some of the definitions of the words in here.
So this song has quite a bit of vocabulary, and you and I are both social studies English teachers, and vocabulary is something that we shove down young people's throats every single year for our entire careers. So we have several. So I'm going to go through them. We have fascism, we have swastikas, we have the Klan, we have sexism, racism, homophobia, Aryan Nation, hammerskins, and master race. Mm-hmm. So we have several terms here that I just wanted to define. Basically, all of these terms are academic treatises in and amongst themselves, and people study the history and the examples and the people involved in these terms for entire academic and research careers, which we'll list some people that we've come across, but I would highly recommend if you just go and do a little bit more research if any of these terms are something that you're still developing in your own mind. So the first thing we have is fascism. Fascism is a political philosophy. It's a movement or regime that exalts a nation and often race above the individual. And that stands for a centralized, autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader with severe economic and social regimentation and a forcible suppression of opposition. So I was doing a little bit of reading on fascism. One book that I found to be particularly interesting recently, besides Hannah Arendt's incredible The Origins of Totalitarianism, which is a hard read, I read a much more accessible book called On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder, mm-hmm. which is spectacular, and I would recommend people go check out. But I also came across a new book written by Jason Stanley, who is a professor of philosophy at Yale University. And he has a book called How Fascism Works, which offers one perspective on the word. So he defines fascism as a cult of the leader who promises national restoration in the face of humiliation brought on by supposed other groups like communists, socialists, Marxists, minorities, immigrants, people who are supposedly posing a threat to the character and the history of a nation. And so fascism tends to be a lot about the nation itself. For example, a very common old saying is there was a Spanish fascist who once said, "I'm not fascist, I'm Spanish." So it's massively tied to nationalism. It's often very related to borders and protection. Like the caravan, quote unquote, invasions are an example of how borders can be obsessed about. So if you think about those things that I said about like, humiliation and restoration, you have the terms like MAGA or, Keep America Great Again. You have groups like ICE being sent into, the term is Democrat-led cities.
Yeah.
Because those cities have leaders with spines sometimes who don't bend to the will, like boot-licking sycophants, even though they have plenty of their own problems. All of these sort of scream to me about like performative fascism, performative tendencies that, kind of brush on what Stanley is getting at with his definition here. It's like ultra nationalist, it's insular, it leads to a constricting of the worldview as opposed to an expansion of the worldview.
Yeah, one of our fellow subscribers on Chris Hanna's Patreon, Steve Coley, recommended an interview with Jason Stanley, and I listened to one earlier and kind of led me to something else from Democracy Now! And in that book, he lays out a framework for detailing what he calls the 10 pillars of fascism. And he says one is the mythic past in which the great people were able to dominate. The second is propaganda, where things are inverted, like truth or lies become the truth, and myth becomes reality. There's number 3, anti-intellectualism, which is replaced by rage and emotion.
Yeah, well, and then that also reminded me of Richard Hofstadter's amazing book, Anti-Intellectualism in American Life, which was a book I liked.
Yeah, number 4 is unreality, and just think of all of the conspiracy theories that have taken root in America.
Oh, boy.
Number 5 is a hierarchy, like we're the best, this group should be on top. And that leads also to number 6, because that group at the top is also the greatest victims, which then leads to number 7. We then need law and order to protect that group at the top, especially from things like number 8, sexual anxiety. Number 9, he says, is like Sodom and Gomorrah. You have like city centers that are amoral and threaten everything else.
Oh, man.
And then 10 is Arbeit macht free. Work sets you free.
Holy smokes. Whew. Oh my gosh. Anything else about that Stanley interview?
Yeah. And so many of those, you could go through that checklist and whether or not you want to say yes or no, we'll kind of talk about a little bit later. You can find multiple examples of each of one of those elements in our present situation. And there's another great recent podcast from 1A with a few different historians, and they're kind of grappling with whether or not we should call Trump a fascist and what are the implications for doing so. And like Jason Stanley mentioned, as a counter-fascism being a counter to globalization and therefore, focus away from the nation's greatness, the historian Ruth Ben-Ghiat sees fascism in the 20th century as a rise after social progress. If there's victories with gender, racial, and worker rights.
My goodness. Whenever you were going through that 10-part list, like events were just flashing in my mind. And, a few minutes ago, I was talking about the term performative fascism. And, Jason Stanley really differentiates clearly between fascism and performative fascism.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
he said in an interview as well that I read that because we can identify so many current events as performative fascism, that should be enough to worry people deeply,
Mhm.
um, because it's almost like a testing ground for pushing the envelope. And that's what we've seen the last 5 years. Like, this shouldn't really come as a surprise to anybody, but it comes as a surprise to people, and people really push back. And the terms like derangement syndrome get thrown
Mhm.
around as you know differentiating between like political parties in, I would just say, a super demonizing manner, like flippantly saying like, oh, the Dems and stuff like
Yeah,
that. And I'm just like,
right,
come
right.
on, man. So anyway, so let's keep going through our vocab. Our next one is swastika. This was used as a symbol of anti-Semitism or Nazism, um, which everybody who has been in a school has learned about.
Mm.
You probably read Night by Elie Wiesel in English class in 8th or 10th grade. Interestingly, the swastika also has ancient roots in Buddhism, Jainism, and Hinduism, and the symbol was co-opted by Nazis and stolen by the Nazis. And the history behind that is quite interesting. My religious studies high school students and I would always study the origins and the meaning of the swastika within different Eastern religious traditions. And they were also then interested in how the Nazis essentially stole and co-opted it. So fascists ruin everything because it is a swastika is a common front door adornment in
Mm.
India. You see it everywhere. Um, and it's a Sanskrit term. The word "su" means good, and the word "asti" means to exist, and so it's "su asti ka." Okay,
Mm.
and so it's a Sanskrit term, and it's often translated as "all is well."
Oh.
Is what the term is usually translated as. So it's fascists ruin everything. So our next vocab term, dear listeners, is Klan. And obviously we're talking about the Ku Klux Klan here. They started during Reconstruction at the end of the Civil War. The Klan quickly mobilized as a vigilante group to intimidate Southern African Americans and any whites who would help them, and to prevent them from enjoying basic civil rights. The Southern Poverty Law Center today estimates there are between 5,000 and 8,000 Klan members. And a really interesting book that I recommend is related to religion and the Ku Klux Klan. And it's called The Gospel According to the Klan. And it's by my friend, Dr. Kelly Baker, who is a religious studies professor that I'm friends with.
Yeah, and for some people we have so many listeners who are from outside of the states, and maybe what is kind of common knowledge with the KKK isn't as well known. So just to break it down a little bit more, there were 3 periods of the Klan from 1865 to 1871. So it was first founded almost immediately after the end of the Civil War by former Confederates in Pulaski, Tennessee on Christmas Eve. And they used ritualistic violence and murder to terrorize African Americans and their allies in, at this time, predominantly the South. For example, in September of 1868, Southern white Democrats hunted down around 200 African Americans in an effort to suppress voter turnout. The Klan kind of goes away for a little bit and returns in the middle of the First World War. So from 1915 to 1944 is the second period. And this is when the Klan adapts the robes and the burning crosses, like the symbols that everyone associates with them. But those were elements that were created for the film Birth of a Nation, a film depicting the Civil War and Reconstruction era. It was based on a book called The Klansman, and it supported racial segregation while depicting African Americans in demeaning and dehumanizing ways. So those weren't like the robe and the burning cross weren't used beforehand. There were disguises used. And also, I think it's important to note that people mistakenly associate the Klan historically with like rural areas, but during the 20s and 30s, there were more urban members in Indiana, not like a state in the South. Indiana was not a part of the Confederacy, had the most members in the 1930s.
Well, and I think about Birth of a Nation as well, which was screened at the White House by President Woodrow Wilson. A little historical tidbit there for you, which was, disturbing as well.
Yeah, there's this quote. He had allegedly said something like it was history written with lightning. Apparently, like there's not much real evidence to support that he said that. Like later on, there's a magazine, I want to say like 20 or 30 years later, that is the first appearance of it. But Wilson is a notorious racist.
Mm-hmm.
So whether or not he saw the film as an objective good, his personal ideas and his policies are reflected very much so in the Klan's belief system.
Yeah, and I know that Princeton has been kind of grappling with Wilson's legacy there because he was involved with Princeton University for a long time. So those were two eras that you talked about. Is there anything regarded like, post-war, post-World War II that you know about?
Yeah, so from 1946 until the present. And one thing that in the book that I mentioned previously, Kathleen Belew's Bring the War Home, she kind of mostly focuses on the post-Vietnam era, but she talks about how you can predict high rates of white power group membership immediately following times of war, or as soldiers are returning from foreign conflict. You can pretty much see in every case since World War II, a rise in white power membership as people are returning home from service.
Well, and that's a book you've mentioned on this show multiple times. Do you want to say that title again, just in case people are curious?
Yeah, that's Bring the War Home by Kathleen Belew.
I know that several listeners have actually commented back to you that they've actually ordered that book because you mentioned it a couple of times. So that's pretty cool that you've inspired some readers out there. So a couple more vocab terms here. So we have sexism, which is prejudice or discrimination based on a person's sex or gender. Sexism can affect anyone, but it primarily affects women and girls, I think, for the most part throughout history. It's been linked to stereotypes and gender roles and may include the belief that one sex or gender is intrinsically superior to the other.
Mm-hmm.
So we also have racism, which is prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against a person or people on the basis of their membership of a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or a marginalized population. And the next one, which I've seen change a lot over the last couple of decades since this song came out, is homophobia, which is the dislike of or prejudice against homosexual people. But I also see this term hugely developing in the last 25 years to include transphobia and hatred, bullying, intimidation, violence against human beings across the LGBTQIA plus spectrum. And even the term LGBTQIA plus, which sounds so thorough, isn't even really the be all end all. I think this is developing a lot. I've been profoundly impressed with the ongoing conversations around gender, sex, and sexuality, and exploring terms like pansexuality, GNC, non-binary, demisexual, asexual, genderqueer, gender fluid, and even gender honorifics such as MX as opposed to like Mr. or Mrs. And a lot of places where I'm seeing this work being done so interestingly and so well and so caring and so compassionately is through gay straight alliances or gender spectrum alliances in high schools. And that work blows me away, how far ahead on homophobia and the gender spectrum conversations teenagers are compared to so many adults. Like I think back on my high school, like in the 2000, there weren't any kids in my high school that were openly out as gay. And in the high school that I taught in from 2013 to 2018, it was just common. Like there were so many out students across the gender and sexuality spectrum. Just blew me away.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot has changed.
Yeah, I feel like I learned from my students
for sure
in that way more than they learned from me.
Yeah. So our next term that Chris throws out in this song is Aryan Nation, which had its heyday in the 80s and 90s. These were neo-Nazis, racist skinheads, Klansmen, and other white nationalists who would convene regularly at an Idaho compound for an annual World Congress. In 2000, Aryan nations began to fall apart after losing a civil rights lawsuit brought on by the Southern Poverty Law Center that depleted their finances, and the physical decline and then the death of their founder, Richard Butler, further devastated the group. The Aryan nations splintered into a handful of groups with a bunch of people vying for leadership. So that's a quick rundown of that term. And the next one we have is the Hammerskins. The Hammerskins are one of the oldest active racist skinhead groups in the United States, and they have a history of violence. Their logo and primary symbol, which was appropriated from Pink Floyd, consists of two crossed hammers, usually superimposed over a cogwheel. And it's a symbol that they appropriated from the record The Wall. And the symbol typically appears in red, white, and black in colors of the Nazi flag. And in some cases, hammers and cogwheels appear over a red, black, and white colored shield. And in the U.S., the Hammerskins differentiate themselves regionally, such as the Confederate Hammerskins and the Western Hammerskins, and they can have regional variations of the logo as well. Sometimes there's even one that incorporates a Confederate flag. So the Hammerskins have spread to several different countries outside the U.S. and appear there as well, often incorporating nationalist colors and symbols of other countries.
Yeah, kind of related to that, Mark Pitcabbage, he is a senior research fellow at the Center of Extremism and the Anti-Defamation League. He does a ton of research on race-based extremism, and he has this database. They have a database of racist symbols that include this, but even things that I didn't even realize, everything from memes that have been appropriated to even a symbol and a flag from the band Typo Negative that I had no idea had been, used as a symbol of a racial superiority. And that's definitely someone else to check out. Check out Mark Pitcabbage on Twitter, and you can find out some other research and some maybe other symbols that we didn't mention here.
Yeah, and the thing you mentioned, symbols and stuff like that are being researched is changing all the time, and everybody will remember the examples of people being on camera the last couple of years, at the White House or testifying in front of Congress with holding the white power symbol with their hand, and then afterwards saying, "How dare you accuse me of holding this symbol?" And things like that. And people are saying, "Well, you were doing it," and they're like, "I just had my hand rested in a specific way," and it's a tremendous national gaslighting of what you're seeing isn't really true, and it's very disorienting, the fast pace with which this stuff develops, and how I can't keep up, and I try to pay attention to what's going on in the world.
Yeah, you have symbols literally invented to kind of misdirect people, but when they are then used by white supremacists and neo-Nazis, to me, if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, it's a duck, regardless of whatever the origin is. And so, yeah, I mentioned Bring the War Home, and part of her thesis in that book is that, these different groups, the Hammerskins, Aryan Nations, neo-Nazis, the vast spectrum of white power activists, she calls them, she argues they're not as disparate or rivalrous as the mainstream media and popular culture often depict. And they purposefully maintained a visage of like leadership resistance that look like random, unconnected attacks, but are actually a part of a united front organized to overthrow the US government and replace it with a regime dedicated to white power. So like this whole lone wolf framework and wording that you hear about people like Timothy McVeigh, she argues against that and says that he was a part of something much greater, because if there is leaderless resistance and if there are these disconnected groups, it's then harder to bring them down.
Wow. That's even scarier.
Mhm.
Well, in our last term that we have in this song is master race, which is a concept of Nazi ideology in which the putative Nordic or Aryan races predominant among German and other Northern European peoples are deemed to be the highest in racial hierarchy. And members of this alleged master race were referred to as Herrenmenschen, master humans, and I'm sure that I'm butchering the pronunciation of that term in general, but that's just something that I found. So that's our vocab lesson. What did you think about that?
That's helpful. Yeah, definitely. If it's one thing to kind of have a familiarity, but to tell the distinction between different groups and terms, I think it's important, especially while kind of diving into the context of this song.
Mm-hmm. And these are all very well known things that people can follow up on and can dive into a heck of a lot more. But why don't we go into the song here a little bit? What do you think?
Yeah. At first, I can't help but think, like, what does it say about America that we went from celebrating someone like Woody Guthrie, who wrote songs like Round and Round Hitler's Grave and Tear the Fascist Down and Talking Hitler's Head Off Blues. And, he wrote This Machine Kills Fascists on his guitar, but now the anti-fascists are the real fascists in America. I just can't, like that. I was thinking about that the whole time while kind of preparing for this.
Yeah, so there is far too much that can be said about the United States between 2015 and 2020, and I'm sorry in advance to our listeners around the world if this is sort of like U.S. centric on this episode. This is something that, I feel I'm just drowning in these examples that we see. So first of all, in this song, I want to go back to Jason Stanley for a second, because he has a thought experiment to consider with regards to all the things that are mentioned in this song. He says, if someone described to you, here's a country, the leader of the country claims that he is going to remain in power for many years beyond what is legal. He sends federal forces in to quell largely peaceful protests for racial justice in the country. The attorney general seems dedicated to him over the rule of law. The major political party that controls the courts and most of the government has as their entire platform devotion to this leader. What would you think about that country? Where would you think the direction of that country was headed? I would think that country was losing its democratic status, especially when it had a history of voter suppression and the highest incarceration rate in the world as background conditions.
Yeah.
So none of this is good. And it's bewildering to people, to watch people who weren't political for their, so this is a personal example for me. Like none of this is this is all completely bewildering to me. Watching people that I've known for many, many years who have never been political in any way now be utterly devoted to a single person or a single party completely, and not offer a single critique beyond saying things like, I know people don't like him, but
Yeah.
so there's no critique whatsoever. And I know because I follow people closely who have just gone in a specific direction with their life and their worldview that is really bewildering and scary to me.
Yeah. And, my interpretation and my breakdown of the song is also going to be very American centric. And I think that probably just speaks to how we interpret art and how we process things because of the context of now, but also the context of my work as a US history teacher. I can't really escape it, but that's how I'm seeing it as well. But, you know, like the very opening of the lyrics with the swastikas and clan robes, like, you know, Propaganda have already established themselves as like challenging the punk scene. But this album and here clearly is where they switch, I think, to provocation and agitation. And, you know, I'm definitely younger than probably like the average Let's Talk More Rock fan, especially those who came in with that album. And again, like it's really easy for me to not understand how prevalent neo-Nazis were in the punk and hardcore scenes. And, you know, I've read, you know, about the straight edge crews going to war with skinheads in Boston, and on Chris's Patreon, he does an incredible job painting how uncertain and dangerous, right? How, like he said, it was just dangerous, and he was like, in a way, kind of enjoying it, but he kind of looks back on it like, how was he in the middle of all that? You know, but for me, like the time I started to go to shows like you, like maybe there were tough guys there, but they weren't ideological. So the nationalist element was mostly driven underground. And, you know, for me, I remember a punk at my high school getting in trouble for having a patch on his jacket that had a person throwing a swastika in the garbage.
Yep.
So in my formative years, it was definitely like, this isn't really a concern from others, especially adults. Like, this isn't really an issue. That's a thing of the past.
Yeah, you know, and something Sulynn said in our chat that lingered with me as we were thinking about this episode is the idea of kids learning these things young, how important that is. And you and I as teachers, I've been thinking about this a lot because, you know, I've had students show up to class in MAGA hats and stuff like that. And it was like very confrontational, and people in the class had visceral reactions against it. And in the moment, I really didn't have any authority to do anything about it, because we're talking about like 2015, 2016. But that got me thinking, you know, and I've been thinking about the slippery slope of paths in life when people go in different directions. You know, in order for me to understand how people turn to things like hatred as a guiding worldview, I've been thinking a lot about the microcosm of like middle school, during which I found music and began to crave acceptance in social circles, like I said earlier. And in fact, I've reflected on this a lot. And I feel astonishingly lucky that I didn't wind up a little Nazi.
Yeah.
A guy whose friendship I desperately craved came into my life in 6th grade, and he was a racist, self-described white supremacist. He had an older brother who was super into that kind of stuff. And this 6th grade friend of mine would, you know, casually state that he was a skinhead, into the Confederacy, into white power. But like, we're sitting there and he's like shredding on his like Fender Stratocaster, like while he's telling me these things and like playing me Metallica tapes. You know what I mean? So like, I was so dumb and so oblivious to what all this meant that I didn't have the words or the background knowledge to push back. And then he showed me bands like Rancid and Tool and Pantera and like White Zombie and the Butthole Surfers and Metallica and Butt Trumpet and the Dead Kennedys, which is very ironic.
Yeah, no kidding.
So I was like, whoa, man, I love this music this guy is showing me, and he must be so cool.
Yeah.
While not even like understanding like what he was saying when he was saying, I'm into white supremacy. I didn't get it. And I went over to his house all the time because I wanted him to like me so much. And this is like formative stuff, man. Like I'm almost 37 and I remember this stuff like it was yesterday. And we're talking about 1996 in the suburbs of St. Louis. Like, and it is like burned into my memory. I remember going to this dude's house. His like older brother would pick us up from middle school and I would ride in the back of his brother's pickup truck. And, you know, they would say things like they were like just like super casually racist that they would just say to me. And like I was so desperate to be liked. And I'm actually kind of shocked that I didn't decide just to become a Nazi and just beg these people to like me.
Mm.
And, you know, I think about like the words of like somebody that I know, you know, the work of Christian Picciolini, a well-known speaker today who was radicalized at almost the same age because of how lonely and sad of a kid he was. And I think if I wasn't so like gentle, you know, so questioning of things like my own sexuality, so completely conflict averse, if I had a like an ounce of anger in me, I would have just become a Nazi just simply because I wanted to be liked. And, you know, I was not and am not a confident or strong person. Like if I had, you know, a more testosterone driven young person mindset, I was exactly the kind of person who could have been plucked and put into like quote unquote community of white nationalists. And I basically would have believed anything that they said, you know? And I was like rereading the liner notes of Less Talk, More Rock today. And, you know, I noticed that Chris is like writing to young people, you know, like in the liner notes a lot about how I didn't know anything. And all you got to do is keep trying and keep reading. And like, I find these like liner notes to be so inspirational. And I think about how possibly essential this record may have been to like keeping me from diving into the other route of the little white supremacist group at my school and going in a different path.
Yeah, there was definitely a divide at my middle school, and I was on the wrong side of that divide as well. And I thought I had to try on a couple hats, and I thought it was okay for me to use certain words and to kind of disparage people with such a limited understanding of how the world works and how the world works against people. And, like that, I think then definitely seeing, racism, if I, at that time thinking, whatever, who cares, or it's not that bad, it only being an individual thing, right? It was just something that's wrong with a person, or not even wrong with a person. It's just something that someone embodies or believes, and not understanding that racism is just a web that controls and explains so much of the world, that the biggest problem isn't even so much about what an individual believes, it's how racism shapes everything else.
Yeah. And this song is a super interesting one because I know the band have changed a lot over the years. Chris is extremely reflective on his life. I think that he demonstrates the kind of person who continues to try to expand the way that he thinks about the world, as opposed to retreating into a shell, and a mental shell defined by narrowness. And, so one of the biggest examples of, modern day, fascism or whatever that you can think of is like the Richard Spencers of the world.
Yeah.
Who's like, oh, I want an ethno state. And I'm just like, oh my God. But a couple of years ago, Richard Spencer got decked on television while he was giving an interview. And Vice, the publication, reached out to Chris Hanna and interviewed him about this song in 2017, after Richard Spencer got jacked in the head during an interview. And Vice asked him, Is It Okay to Punch Nazis? Because this song is like, the only good fascist is dead.
Right.
Maybe alluding to them being like violently,
Mm-hmm.
their lives ended. And my personal views on conflict is like, I don't want anybody to die. And so that's a very abrasive title.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris has, I think, thought about this a lot in the last several years. He gave an example of being on tour and going to, I think it was Dachau concentration camp while on tour with Propaganda. And he saw a guy running around at Dachau with a swastika, like armband or T-shirt or something. And a swastika is illegal to display in Germany. But Chris and Propaganda saw this dude running around with a swastika, and they chased after him to beat him up. And then they were like intercepted by a social worker who was there chaperoning this lost soul child who had turned to far right, Nazism. And this social worker was taking this little Nazi to the concentration camp to show them the extreme implementation of a fascist ideology. So this social worker chases Chris down, who was chasing after this kid with a swastika on him. And, Chris realized that he was chasing somebody who was like 12.
Yeah.
And I think about how I had students that spoke in extremely right-wing ways in my classroom when I was asking them to consider things like human rights. And I don't think people realize how difficult it is to be a teacher who needs to keep a classroom functioning while ideas tied to centuries of hurt and oppression and violence and murder and genocide are casually coming out of young people's mouths now and then. It's a very jarring experience to be a teacher in a moment like that. And I take that very seriously because I found that teaching something like the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights is now seen as like partisan. And I'm like, what in the world? People who hunt down kids to indoctrinate them with like fascist ideology are monsters. But the kids who are brought into these folds are kids. So just like I could have been roped in by the neo-Nazis in 6th grade and fascist ideas in 6th grade, so could many other people listening to this if they're honest with themselves. And Chris gave that interview to Vice about chasing down that little kid who was wearing a swastika while their social worker was trying to deprogram them so that they could grow up to be a functioning human adult in a multicultural, diverse society. And I think that experience really shook Chris as well.
Yeah, I'm sure you know that we're not going to win over those lost or misguided souls who, permanent marker or swastika or some profane word onto a desk by yelling at them and screaming at them. Like we're not going to make a connection in that way. And of course, like that is going to be maybe different than if you're at a show, at a bar and someone has a swastika in the back of their vest. But in our, kind of sphere of influence, compassion and some deep conversations are certainly going to be more effective to lead people to whether it's thinking it's okay to do it or that it's funny, or whether it's thinking whatever ideology or belief is right and okay, like guiding them in that process. And we've mentioned a couple books already, but I also recommend Autobiography of a Recovering Skinhead by Frank Mink. And, this is a guy who was, who was misguided, and he felt alone, and he fell into addiction and, drugs, and basically the right person talked him into some beliefs that he kind of already embodied in a way because he didn't have anyone steering him otherwise. And, he just had to spend the rest of his life kind of redirecting himself and kind of writing his own past and righting those wrongs and trying to undo the damage from his years of, violence and years of violence. And like his story is part of the inspiring story for the film American History X.
That's another film that is so essential to my life, and I credit that movie immensely to keeping me from, becoming a little Nazi in like 6th grade. Seriously. That movie was so profound to me. I watched it so many times. And there's like a punk band in that movie that is like singing horrendous things.
Yeah.
And I was like listening to that and I was like, is this like the bands that I listen to? And then I had like, because I couldn't tell what they were saying really. And then I think I got like closed caption on like a TV finally in my house. And then I was able to get the closed caption on during that film, and I was able to hear the words, and I was just like, oh my God, this is about killing people. And so I think that movie was hugely influential on keeping me thinking of people as people, and also the work of like things like Plea for Peace tour, Ska Against Racism tour, like basically like the work of like Mike Park and Asian Man Records was like so important to me at that age as well. Like whenever I discovered MU 330 and I discovered the work of the rest of Asian Man Records and all their work in anti-racism, I mean, those things stand out to me as like almost rescuing me from craving the acceptance of people who would have just taken me down like a horrendous path in life.
Yeah, I mean, kind of coming back to the lyrics, I think there are so many maybe myths or cheap arguments that can be made, like that where it says, what exactly is your great historical accomplishments of your race that make you proud to be white? And, obviously depending on where you live, you may or may not be surprised at how often I hear, why isn't there a white history like that?
Oh God.
Or they're erasing history canard. And, the week after George Floyd was murdered, I said to myself, if I don't get angry phone calls from parents, I'm not doing enough. And sure enough, I've gotten more angry phone calls in the first 4 weeks than I have in the previous 13 years of teaching. And that reminds me of something else Jason Stanley said. He said, I feel this every day. History is a battlefront because history is how people think about the future. And Americans see hard history and any history that doesn't reinforce, their greatness or American exceptionalism as subversive. And even students instantly offer excuses for people in the past. The U.S. wasn't the only country that had slavery, or Thomas Jefferson treated his slaves well, or there was already warfare between native nations in America before Europeans arrived. And like all of those statements are incredibly problematic for a variety of reasons. But the point is that when people have their understanding of history challenged, they instantly get defensive. And there's a great quote at the beginning of An Indigenous People's History of the United States. And it says,
that's a great book.
We are here to educate, not forgive. We are here to enlighten, not accuse. And, I openly tell parents that my job teaching history is to challenge what their students think, and not to reinforce it, but to challenge it. There's a great article in Forbes by the historian Matt Gabriel called Why Historians Are Like Tax Collectors, which breaks that idea down a little bit more.
Yeah, and like you were mentioning something about taking things personally, like if you say something big picture about like the racist history of VA loans, FHA loans, the suburbs, neighborhood redlining and block busting, if you talk about these things with certain people, people are like, you're talking about me and you're critiquing me. And I'm like, dude, it's a big picture. You might have benefited from these things in certain ways. But I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about big things that are systemic in nature, which we all participate in willingly or unwillingly, and not talking about them is going to keep these things entrenched forever instead of openly acknowledging it. And it makes me crazy. And like, I talk about this all the time with people, and I'm like, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about big things that are trends in society that are observable across centuries, and you getting defensive and everything in the moment instead of, talking openly about them doesn't help. It's like, I'm not talking about you. I believe you're a good person. If you you know what I mean? Like I try to give people the benefit of the doubt so often. But then when people get really, really personally defensive and offended when you try to talk about a big picture concept, it's so hard. It's so demoralizing. And I feel like the purpose of is just to deflate instead of make our country a better place. And like it's important to constantly learn. And a few years ago when Chris gave that interview with Vice, he said, I'm 46 years old and I'm still waking up to the reality that we live in a true de facto white supremacy. The fascists are still there. They just dress differently.
Mm-hmm.
So you have these fellows like Spencer calling for an identitarian ethno-state and wearing suits with fancy haircuts, which Dylan Slocum from Spanish Love Songs sings about very hilariously on their album Schmaltz, about not being able to find a haircut that hasn't been co-opted by Nazis. Well done, Dylan. I love that song. But, we just have to keep learning. And like, to me, that's the purpose of life, is learning and growing my worldview instead of constricting it and vilifying people. That's not like the way I want to live.
Yeah. So why don't we start making a history worth being proud of and start fighting the real fucking enemy? Then,
Yes.
like it says on the website, the white male capitalist supremacist. So right now in my class, we just covered Bacon's Rebellion. And I think it's important to note like how far back manufactured racial divides go in American and colonial British history. So like colonists in Virginia were angry over high taxes and what they saw as a lack of government protection against Native Americans, and the refusal to let colonists settle further west. So Nathaniel Bacon led former indentured servants, a mix of white and black former indentures, in months of conflict. They ultimately burned down Jamestown in 1676. Bacon dies of dysentery before the rebellion ends, and the governor is then recalled to England because of his failure to lead. But what's important is that servitude and slavery from this point become more racialized as a way to prevent, poor whites and poor blacks from uniting, thereby cementing and codifying the wealth and the power of the colonial elites. And unfortunately, this identity and the defensive push to preserve this claim of superiority prevents all of us, globally, from addressing the issues that threaten everybody, which is, climate change and industrial capitalism.
Yeah, and let's talk about the closing part of this song. So we have swastikas and clan robes, sexist, racist, homophobes. This one's for the master race, my brown power ass and your white power face. Kill them all and let a Norse god sort them out. Which I read about that closing line. It was they were writing this song in Winnipeg or whatever back in the 90s, and then they were writing this song and somebody just yelled that around a table in the dining room of the house, and then they all just went into hysterical laughter. And they're like, that's it, that's the end of the song. What do you think about the end of this song for the lyrics?
Yeah, man, it's important to restate the fact that race is not scientific. It said the master race, and it is a socially constructed classification. Humans are 99% genetically similar. Melanin predates humans, and we don't think about the racial divides amongst mice and fish. And the resurrection of race science is now just repackaged with jargon, and it's cooked research, and it's shielded by free speech absolutists. And W.E.B. Du Bois was fighting against race science over 100 years ago. He said, quote, "The human species so shade and mingle with each other that it is impossible to draw a color line between black and other races." And, it sucks as a metalhead that I have to do an FBI level background check on a band before I start listening to them. Fascism, racism, and National Socialism might have gotten the steel toe boot out of punk and hardcore, but it's everywhere in metal, and the overt bands might be relegated to some white power label, but neo-Nazis are still everywhere in mainstream bands. They just sing about nature, and then they just change some pagan symbol to like reflect some white nationalist symbol now. And it's like a constant struggle. Then it becomes a debate on, oh, just like the art, when I just don't want to listen to and support racists and white supremacists and nationalists.
Yeah, and like that's one of the biggest problems that I have with listening to metal, because I like metal, but like I always am so unsure of what I'm hearing. So like when I listen to metal, like I tend to listen to metal bands with like women lead singers. Like Svalbard is so great, and like they are so fantastically on point with like values and like who I want to like be as a person. So I'm like super picky about my metal, because I just don't want to listen to so much of that stuff, because I can't tell like what these folks' intentions are, and I have no patience for that. There's too much good music out there to be unsure of what I'm hearing. So yeah, that's just kind of why my I love metal, but it's so limited within my musical consumption, because I just never know what the objectives and the agenda are for the people that are singing.
For sure. So you want to talk about the music?
Yeah. When I was younger, I always saw this song as non-serious. I saw it as a joke.
Yeah.
So obviously that's wrong. But the music is as outlandish as possible, in my view, to mock the absurdly boring worldview in relation to white supremacy. So like the out-of-the-box musical approach and the comical vocal delivery always made me misjudge and downplay the seriousness of this song.
Yeah.
But I was listening today, man, and this song is made for a 4-piece band. There's like the opening guitar line has that pick sliding and that scratchy second guitar riff.
The Tom Morello riff.
Yeah. It's like just like scratching, scraping the strings. Yeah. And it's made for a 4-piece band, and it's huge and booming. And I did a little tour of the band performing this song over the last couple of decades on YouTube. And there's a guy that I message with who lives in Australia a ton, named Adam Newman. He's got a podcast called The Careers Guy. He lives in New South Wales, Australia. So cheers, Adam. Hello. But he sent me some videos of the band performing in 1997 on Todd's first tour with the band in Australia. And something that struck me about the live performance of this song is that Chris skips over, though, what exactly are the greatest accomplishments of your race to make you so proud to be white. He skips that pretty much every video that I've seen. So apparently that's something that he cut out of the live performance going way back when. But then I watched it in 2007 with Beeve on second guitar. This was in Chris's long jorts cutoff phase with the tall tube socks with the blue stripes around the socks. So Chris's socks are much shorter now, and his shorts aren't quite as long anymore. That newer wardrobe kind of fits the victory lap sound. But I saw them play it with Beeve in 2007, and it was just chugging, man. It was so awesome, and it was sweaty. And, Beeve was just like pouring sweat, but just into it. He was just going out. Like the Beeve is such a chill guy. And he was just into it. And I was like, yeah, Beeve. And then I watched another video of Propaganda from last fall in 2019 at the Park Theater in Winnipeg. What's up, Winnipeg? And the bands Mosa and Flash Out were playing that show. And so I checked out those bands too. I watched a Mosa video. I watched them perform a song called Godless, which is cool. Then I watched a video of Flash Out, a Winnipeg metal band who kind of reminded me of Cannibal Corpse, who is from here in Buffalo. So cool bands. Winnipeg seems like it has an unbelievable scene. I'm a huge Mobina Galore fan as well too. So Winnipeg seems to have a lot going on musically. But all of these performances of this song, 2019, 2007, and 1997, all three of these performances of this song, I was like, it doesn't feel dated, doesn't feel wrong.
Yeah.
It's just like, this is how the world is. And it's like Propaganda just nails this timelessness so much on so much of their material. It's just unbelievable to me.
Yeah, that's a great observation. Like maybe the effect isn't the same. Maybe now it's more unifying than the purpose is to kick people out.
Yeah, they're dressed differently. It's different now.
Yeah, right. But yeah, it's super heavy. And to me, I kind of see the song as like an exclamation mark, then, a full sentence itself, maybe. The opening riff, you said, is outlandish. That's a great word. It makes me think like what's coming isn't serious. Like it's a little goofy. But then the vocals kick in, and I think then it kind of switches, and like you kind of take it seriously. And one of our listeners, Elliot, said that like the riff reminds him of Torgo's theme, which is a reference to Manos, the Hands of Fate. And I'm a big Mr. Science Theater fan, and I kind of hear that. So it seems like the music is purposefully, I don't know, stupid.
Yeah.
And sometimes
On
like,
purpose, for sure.
Yeah, like to drive the point home. I mean, in one of the live videos I saw, Chris actually yells Hammerskin solo during what would be where he says, just what exactly are the greatest accomplishments. He says that like that's all they can play is just like these single note solos. So yeah, like maybe it's maybe I didn't take it super seriously then, but the vocals are great, but also funny as hell.
Yeah.
It's heavy. The bass kind of slaps. And I think my favorite part about it musically is imagining John K. Samson playing bass on this, because
the gentlest man ever.
Right. Someone who is so poetic and, literary and, introspective, and writes these like, calm and thoughtful songs. If you remember the Jaded Punk Hulk, that Twitter account, he had a tweet that said, "It crazy to listen to Weaker Thans and remember John K. Samson once in Propagandy. It like imagining Michael Bolton and Slayer." So I think of this guy playing this song, but again, like you said, braver than I've ever been, right?
Heck yeah, man.
And calling people out in a way that is like, you have to just take your hat off and doff your hat at them for doing so.
Absolutely. Did you have any thoughts on were there any YouTube comments that you found that you really liked from listeners?
Yeah, I saw one that said, "We need this energy right now." And that seems to echo what everyone is saying on Twitter who's been sharing the song.
Yeah. I found Charlottesville Brought Me Here, which rest in peace to Heather Heyer, who was murdered by a white supremacist at the Charlottesville rally a couple of years ago. And, Propaganda are a relevant band. Yeah. And they've been around for a long time. But, when people die at the hands of white supremacists, it says, this person says that they found Propaganda because of the hatred that exists in the world. And it reminds me that so many people want the world to be better. And Propaganda can be like a moment of like soothing comfort, and when things are surrounded by chaos and maelstrom.
Feeling like you're not alone. Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. And during this, ongoing pandemic where I am so frequently alone, the feelings of isolation as we head into the winter time are so intense. But another person wrote, every time he says sitcoms, I can't help but smile.
Yeah, so great. Sitcoms. Thigh Master. Then the lyrics in the on the website include Thigh Master as well.
Yeah. I love it how they have all the modified lyrics on the website. It's so fun. Like, so if anybody out there is like, going through your Propaganda catalogs, you should go and look at the website, because the lyrics for all the songs are on the website, but they are modified in some really interesting ways. Like we talked about Rock for Sustainable Capitalism, where they talk about jackass instead of like the fat shaming version. But like another person said, you can't be proud of your race anyway. You just happened to be born a certain color. Save pride for something you earned. And I thought that was awesome. So what does this song teach you? What do you think?
Yeah, I clearly remember a few moments where I realized the version of history that I had been sold was a manufactured set of myths and misinformation and omissions, whether that was like reading Howard Zinn's A People's History for the first time. But I think what hit me even harder was the later realization that the American system of government that, we've all been taught to memorize and idolize was also grossly misrepresented. Arthur Schlesinger's The Imperial Presidency comes to mind, realizing that the powers of the president on paper are very different from the powers in reality. And, this song makes me think less about like, is Trump a fascist or any of the preceding presidents? I kind of think that's a little bit distracting. We get stuck in this like binary viewing of fascism, like is or isn't. But with the dismantling of institutions like the post office, endorsing vigilante violence, discrediting science and academia, and like you said, those reports about forced hysterectomies at ICE detention centers, the question isn't like, is Trump a fascist? It's how much fascism are we willing to accept?
Oh, yeah. To me, this song makes me think about the path of my life so much. And I find the ideologies and the worldviews of racists and white supremacists and, sexist and transphobic and homophobic people to be extraordinarily boring. And it pains me so deeply that folks who hold these hateful ideologies are able to cause so much pain and suffering across the whole world. And I'm thinking about some massive turning point moments of my own life where things really could have gone the other way for me. And I'm so grateful that I feel lucky that I turned out the way I did. And it's just kind of, it makes me emotional to think about how many times like I could have been just utterly lost. And as lost as I feel sometimes right now, I'll take my current feelings of lostness over the version of me that would have been a hateful, racist bigot who may have felt more like community or whatever that offers to people,
right?
Who are entrenched in those worldviews. And, as unhappy as life can be sometimes, I feel like I have the ability to think for myself outside of a narrow, limited ideology, and that my goal in life isn't to, trick people into feeling badly about themselves. So that's just kind of some of my concluding thoughts for this particular song.
So let's rate it. I was thinking back to my talk with Dr. Adam Sprinson, our guest on Ska Sucks, and he made a point to say that even novelty songs have something to say, like their culture as well. And this song popped into my head right after that conversation, if you would or wouldn't classify it as a novelty song. But, it has a lot to say. I'm here for it. I'm going to give it a 3.
I'm going to give it a 2.5. It's totally off the wall, wacky, hugely important message, mocks the absurdity of having hatred be one's worldview in a delightfully condensed package of 1 minute and 10 seconds of absurdity. And I like the fact that the band was able to laugh whenever they came up with the kill 'em all and let a Norse god sort them out line. That brings me joy thinking about. So I'm going to go right middle of the road, fence sitter, 2.5. So this is our episode on The Only Good Fascist is a Very Dead Fascist from Less Talk, More Rock. If you would like to reach out, you can find us on Twitter at PropagandyPod. You can find us on Instagram at propagandipod. We love hearing from you. So if you'd like to email us, you can reach us at propagandipod@gmail.com. We will see you next time. We're very grateful for all of our listeners and all of our new friends that we've made. And we'll see you next time.
Genocide, sitcoms, this is your fucking white history, my friend. So why don't we start making a history worth being proud of and start fighting the real fucking enemy? Swastikas and clan robes. Sexist, racist, homophobes. This one's for the master race. My brown power ass in your white power face!